The Keeper's Light, a novel of maritime horror. Chapter 1. The Reliquary Beneath Stone. The mountains remembered what men had forgotten. Dr. Helena Voss understood this truth in her bones as she descended into the darkness beneath the monastery of the Dormition, her headlamp carving a pale wound through air that had not stirred in perhaps 6 centuries. The passage walls wept moisture that smelled of iron and older things, minerals without names, the slow exhalation of stone that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Behind her, the voices of her excavation team had faded to nothing, swallowed by the throat of the mountain. She should have waited for them. Protocol demanded it. But Helena had not built her reputation on protocol. She had built it on instinct, that peculiar academic hunger that separated the merely competent from the truly exceptional. And her instinct now sang with a frequency she had learned to trust absolutely. The passage had been hidden behind a false wall in the monastery's crypt, its existence suggested by an anomaly in ground-penetrating radar scans and confirmed by a single cryptic reference in a 9th century manuscript held in the Vatican's restricted archives. A chamber sealed during the reign of Emperor Basil I, mentioned only as containing that which came from the waters before the waters knew God. Helena had spent 3 years and the entirety of 2 research grants to stand in this moment, her breath clouding before her in the subterranean cold, her headlamp finally illuminating the chamber's contents. It was smaller than she had imagined, barely 10 feet across, the walls carved with a riot of images that her trained eye struggled to parse. Byzantine iconography tangled with something far older, angular symbols that belonged to no alphabet she recognized, depictions of figures that were almost human in the way that fever dreams were almost real. But Helena's attention fixed immediately upon the chamber's center, where a stone pedestal held an object that seemed to drink the light. The reliquary was a masterwork of silver and corroded bronze, its surface worked with scenes of maritime disaster, ships breaking upon rocks, figures drowning beneath stylized waves, a woman's shape rising from deep water with arms that forked like lightning. The craftsmanship was exquisite and deeply wrong. Helena had studied Byzantine metalwork for 2 decades, and nothing in her experience prepared her for the proportions here, the subtle angles that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally, the way her eyes refused to settle. She approached slowly, her archaeological training warring with a more primal instinct that urged retreat. The air grew colder with each step. Her headlamp flickered, battery failing, she told herself, though she had replaced it that morning. When she reached the pedestal, she saw that the reliquary had been sealed with strips of lead stamped with prayers in Greek, Latin, and a 3rd language that writhed on the edge of recognition. The lead seals had been broken. Not recently, the oxidation suggested centuries, but broken nonetheless, from the inside. Helena's gloved hands trembled as she lifted the reliquary's lid. Inside, cradled in rotted silk that had once been purple, lay a fragment of black glass, perhaps 6 inches long and 2 inches wide, a mirror fragment, though no mirror should be that color. Not the black of obsidian or volcanic glass, but a deeper darkness, a black that seemed to possess depth and dimension, as though she looked not at a surface, but into a space that extended far beyond the physical dimensions of the shard. Her reflection did not appear in the glass. Nothing appeared in the glass. And yet Helena felt with absolute certainty that something in that darkness was looking back. She withdrew her hand as though burned. Around the reliquary, she now noticed, the pedestal was inscribed with text in multiple languages: Greek, Syriac, what appeared to be Proto-Romanian, and beneath them all, characters that predated any writing system she could identify. Her Greek was excellent, her Syriac was passable. Both versions said essentially the same thing. Let none wake what sleeps beneath the salt. Let none carry this glass to where water meets stone. She waits. She has always waited. The queen remembers every light. Helena's academic mind immediately began cataloging and contextualizing a syncretic warning text, clearly incorporating Christian and pre-Christian elements, possibly related to folk beliefs about maritime disasters common throughout the Mediterranean and Black Sea regions. The mention of a queen suggested connection to various sea goddess traditions: Amphitrite, Tiamat, the Mesopotamian chaos serpent reinterpreted through. The glass moved. Not physically, the fragment remained exactly where it lay, but something within its depths stirred, a motion like the turning of vast shapes in abyssal waters, and Helena heard, or felt, the distinction blurred, a voice that was not a voice, a sound composed of crashing waves and screaming winds and the final gasps of drowning men. Come. Helena scrambled backward, striking the chamber wall, her headlamp finally dying and plunging her into absolute darkness. In that darkness, she saw, though saw was wrong, though she possessed no framework for what was happening, a woman's face forming in the black glass, a face of terrible beauty and wrongness, features that shifted like reflections on troubled water, a smile that promised depths without end. Carry me to where the light burns. Carry me to where the ships still pass. I have been so patient. When her team found her 20 minutes later, Helena was sitting with her back against the chamber wall, the reliquary clutched to her chest, her face a mask of academic composure that revealed nothing of what had occurred. Extraordinary find, possibly the most significant Byzantine artifact discovered this century. We'll need to arrange immediate transport to the research facility. She did not mention the voice. She did not mention the face in the glass. And when her colleagues asked about the inscription, when young Dr. Marinesco attempted to translate the warnings, Helena found herself dismissing his concerns with an authority that felt borrowed from somewhere else. The artifact needed to move. She understood this with a certainty that felt like her own. It had been sleeping for so long, and there was a place, an island at the edge of maps, where a light burned nightly over dark water, a light that called to ships, that guided them safely past treacherous rocks. For now.
Chapter 2. The Island at the Edge of Maps. The Hebrides wore autumn like a shroud. Thomas Brennan stood at the gallery of Eilean Dubh Lighthouse, watching the morning fog lift from a sea the color of hammered pewter. 30 years he had kept this light, 30 years of storms and solitude, of ships passing safely through channels that had claimed vessels for 1,000 years before the first tower rose on this rock. He knew the patterns of weather and water here better than he knew the lines of his own weathered face. He knew when the seals would gather on the western rocks, when the gannets would return from their mysterious winter wanderings, when the tides would run highest and hungriest against the island's black cliffs. He knew, too, when something was wrong, and something had been wrong for 3 days now, a wrongness he could not name but felt in his joints and his teeth and the hollow space behind his sternum where, his grandmother used to say, the soul made its home. The sea was too quiet. The birds had fled to the mainland, and his daughter, his Isla, his reason for rising each morning, the only thing left of Margaret who had been in the ground these 7 years, had grown strange. Da? He turned from the gallery rail. Isla stood in the doorway to the service room, her dark hair loose around a face that had her mother's bones and his own gray eyes. 17 years old and wise beyond her years, marked by a childhood spent on this isolated rock with only her father and the keening wind for company. She held a cup of tea that steamed in the cold air, offering it with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Could not sleep again?" Thomas asked, taking the cup. His voice was rough from disuse. Whole days sometimes passed with no words spoken between them, their communication refined to gestures and glances, the shorthand of two people who had become each other's entire world. "Strange dreams," Isla said. "The sea was calling." "The sea always calls. Best not to listen." It was an old exchange between them, ritual words whose meaning had worn smooth with repetition. But today, Isla's gaze lingered on the water with an intensity that made Thomas's stomach clench. "There was a woman in my dream. Beautiful, terrible. She was singing from somewhere very deep." "A mermaid, perhaps?" Thomas forced lightness into his voice. "The old folks spoke of them. They lure sailors to—" He stopped. The word drowning caught in his throat. "To their deaths. Yes, I know the stories." She wrapped her thin cardigan tighter around herself. "But this wasn't a mermaid, Da. This was something older, something that was here before there were names for things." The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of deep water, brine and cold, and something else, something organic and wrong, like the smell of things long dead in lightless depths. Thomas had lived his life with the ocean's breath in his lungs, but this made him want to gag. "Come inside, we've work to do. The supply boat comes today." But the supply boat did not come. By noon, the sky had lowered to a ceiling of gray wool, and the radio brought only static punctuated by fragments of a storm warning from the mainland. Thomas performed his maintenance routines with the mechanical precision of long habit, checking the lamp mechanism, testing the generators, inspecting the glass of the lantern room for the microscopic cracks that weather and time carved into everything here. Isla helped in silence, her movements slower than usual, her attention drifting constantly to the windows and the sea beyond. The supply boat finally appeared at 3 o'clock, emerging from the mist like a ghost vessel. Thomas descended the spiral stairs to meet it at the landing, Isla trailing behind him. Old Hamish McDougal, who had made this run for 20 years, looked pale beneath his permanent windburn. "Strange crossing," Hamish said as Thomas helped him secure the lines. Compass went mad halfway out, spinning like something was pulling at it. He handed over crates of food and fuel, moving with unusual haste. "And there's a package for you, special delivery from the mainland, some university wanting you to hold something for study." The crate was small, perhaps 2 feet on a side, marked with custom stamps from Romania and academic shipping labels from the University of Edinburgh. Thomas frowned at the crate. He received no special deliveries. The Lighthouse was automated now, really, his position maintained only through the inertia of bureaucracy and his own stubborn refusal to leave the only home Isla had known. "What is it?" Isla asked, her voice strange, too eager, almost hungry. "Paperwork says it's an artifact, some sort of mirror fragment. They want it kept in a stable environment while they arrange permanent storage." Hamish was already climbing back on board his boat. "I'd not stay, Tom. Something feels wrong with the water today. Wrong with everything." Thomas wanted to ask more, but Hamish was casting off, his engine coughing to life, his vessel disappearing into the mist with unseemly speed. Father and daughter stood on the landing with the crate between them. The waves slapped against the rocks with an odd rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. The wind had died to nothing, leaving a silence so complete that Thomas could hear his own blood pulsing in his ears. "We should open it," Isla said. "We should put it in the storage room and forget about it." "Da." She looked at him, and for a moment her eyes seemed darker than usual, deeper, as though something moved behind them in unknown waters. "I need to see what's inside." Thomas felt the refusal form on his tongue. He felt his years of experience, his seaman's instincts, his father's warnings about respecting the ocean's mysteries, all of it urging him to refuse, to send this crate back on the next boat, to burn it if necessary. "Please," Isla whispered. He took her hand. Her skin was cold, so cold, and her pulse beat with that same strange rhythm he heard in the waves. "I," he said, the word tasting like surrender. "I will open it." They carried the crate together up the winding stairs into the heart of the lighthouse as the fog closed around the island like a fist.
Chapter 3. The Black Glass.
The crate contained layers of protection: foam, acid-free tissue, a sealed plastic container, more tissue, and finally a wooden box of obvious antiquity, its surface carved with designs that made Isla's fingers tingle when she touched them. Thomas watched his daughter's face as she lifted the lid. She had inherited her mother's artistic temperament, that capacity for absorption and beauty that could make the world disappear. He had seen her lost for hours in her sketches, rendering the sea and sky in charcoal and graphite with a precision that bordered on obsessive. But he had never seen her face do what it did now, a slackening, a surrendering, as though every defense she had ever built was crumbling at once. Isla? She lifted the black glass from its nest of rotted silk, and the lighthouse seemed to hold its breath. It was perhaps 6 inches long, wickedly sharp at both ends, its surface so dark that it appeared to be a window into a space where light had never existed. Thomas felt his eyes slide away from it, refusing to focus, as though some part of his brain recognized a wrongness too fundamental to process. "It's beautiful," Isla breathed. "Put it back." "Do you see, Da? Do you see how deep it goes?" Thomas forced himself to look at the fragment, to really look, and for a moment, just a moment, he saw not a piece of black glass, but an ocean at night, vast and lightless, with something moving in its depths, something rising. He blinked, and it was only glass again. Isla, put it back in the box. But his daughter was not listening. She carried the fragment to the window, holding it up so that the gray afternoon light passed through it, or did not pass through it, could not pass through it, was swallowed by it entirely. Her lips moved, shaping words Thomas could not hear. "What are you saying?" "Her name," Isla whispered. "She's telling me her name. She's been alone for so long. She's been waiting." The temperature in the room dropped. Thomas saw his breath fog before his face, saw frost crystallize on the window glass in patterns that looked almost like reaching hands. He crossed the room in 3 strides and snatched the fragment from Isla's grip. Pain lanced through his palm. The glass had cut him, though he had been careful of the edges. Blood welled crimson and dripped onto the black surface, and where it touched, the glass drank, the blood spreading and thinning and disappearing into impossible depths. Thomas threw the fragment back into its box and slammed the lid. "We're sending it back," he said. "Tomorrow, we're sending it back with the supply boat." Isla's face was blank, peaceful, terrifying. "She won't let you," she said, in a voice that was not quite her own. "She's found her way back to the light. She's never going to leave." That night, Thomas locked the box in the storage room at the lighthouse's base. He checked the lock 3 times. He wedged a chair under the handle, and still, when he woke at 3 in the morning, his keeper's instinct screaming of wrongness, he found Isla standing in the center of her room, the black glass in her hands, the storage room door hanging open on broken hinges. She was not holding the fragment up to the light this time. She was holding it to her face, pressing the flat of it against her skin, against her eyes, and when she lowered it and turned to him, Thomas saw that her irises had changed. They were still gray, but a deeper gray now, an ocean gray, with flecks in them that moved like debris in troubled water. "I can see where she lives. Would you like me to show you?" Thomas gathered his daughter in his arms. She was so cold, her skin like marble, her heart beating with that same slow, deep rhythm, and carried her to her bed. She did not resist. She felt lighter than she should, as though parts of her were becoming less substantial, more water than flesh. "Sleep," he begged. "Please, love, just sleep." "I am sleeping. I've never been more asleep." She closed her eyes and her breathing steadied, and Thomas sat with her until dawn, watching her face for any sign of the daughter he knew. Sometimes, in the gray pre-light, he thought he saw her features shift, her mouth too wide, her cheekbones too sharp, her expression belonging to something ancient and alien and endlessly patient. But then the sun rose, weak, filtered through the omnipresent fog, and Isla was only Isla again, a tired girl curling into her pillow, murmuring words that might have been, "I love you," or might have been something in a language that died before human tongues shaped speech. Thomas looked down at his palm, at the cut that should have scabbed over by now. It was still bleeding, slowly, steadily, the blood beating and running as though pulled by some invisible tide. Somewhere far below, the sea surged against the rocks, and Thomas could have sworn he heard laughter in the sound.
Chapter 4. The Girl Who Stopped Breathing. Days passed. The supply boat did not return. Thomas tried the radio daily, but he received only static and sometimes fragments of voices speaking in languages he did not recognize, singing songs whose melodies made his head ache and his stomach turn. The fog remained impenetrable, a gray wall that began at the island's edge and extended to infinity. He could not see the mainland, he could not see the shipping lanes, he could not see anything but the lighthouse rising from its rock and the sea churning below, its waters darker now, almost black, as though something were rising from the depths to stain them. Isla stopped eating on the 4th day. She sat at the kitchen table, her breakfast untouched, staring at nothing with those changed eyes. Her skin had taken on a pallor that went beyond pale into something almost translucent, and when Thomas touched her hand, he could feel her bones, bird fragile, as though the flesh between was slowly dissolving. "You need to eat, love." "I'm not hungry." Her voice had developed a quality like echoing, as though she spoke from the bottom of a well. "She feeds me. She shows me such beautiful things." "Who?" Thomas already knew the answer. He asked anyway, desperate to keep her talking, to keep her here. "Who shows you things?" "The Queen." Isla smiled, and her teeth had changed. They seemed slightly too pointed now, slightly too many. She was a goddess once, before there were names for gods, before there was land. She ruled the waters when the waters were everything. And then the world changed, and men built ships, and they made lights to guide them safely past her kingdom. So she learned to make her own lights. "You're talking nonsense, Isla. You're sick. You need..." "False fires on the headlands." Isla's voice dropped to a whisper. "Lanterns in empty coves. Any light that leads ships onto rocks. She can wear them all. But a lighthouse, a true lighthouse, she's never had one of those. Until now." That night, Thomas found Isla on the gallery, standing at the rail in her nightdress, her hair whipping in a wind that did not exist. Her bare feet were bleeding. She had walked across the metal grating without feeling it, and her arms were extended towards the sea, her fingers spread as though welcoming something rising to meet her. Thomas grabbed her, pulled her back inside, wrapped her in blankets by the stove while she shivered with colds that no fire could touch. Her skin was wet, though no rain had fallen, and she smelled of salt and depths and things long dead. "I can't breathe, Da. I can't breathe. The air is too thin." "You're breathing. I can see you breathing." "It's wrong. This isn't how lungs work. This isn't how living works." She looked at him with those terrible ocean eyes, and for a moment she was his Isla again, his little girl, terrified and trapped. "Da, help me. She's inside me. She's been inside me since I first touched the glass. She's been hollowing me out." Thomas held her and wept and promised he would fix this. He would save her. He would never let anything take her from him. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows, and Thomas could have sworn he saw faces in it. The faces of drowned sailors, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes black and empty, their hands reaching for the light. By morning, Isla had carved something in the stone wall of her room. The symbols matched the ones on the box, the ones on the reliquary, the ones Thomas had seen in nightmares since the glass arrived. She had carved them with her nager fingers, which were now black and cracked and bleeding, and when Thomas demanded to know what they meant, she only smiled that terrible smile. A beacon to call the ships home. Thomas destroyed the glass, or tried to. He took it to the rocks at the island's base and smashed it with a hammer, over and over, but the fragment would not break. He threw it into the sea as far as his aching arm could hurl it, but when he returned to the lighthouse, it sat on the kitchen table, dark, impatient, and wet with the ocean's embrace. He buried it. He burned it. He locked it in iron, in salt, in the old protections his grandmother had whispered about on winter nights. Nothing worked. The glass always returned, always found its way back to Isla's hands, and each time it did, a little more of his daughter slipped away. On the 6th night, Thomas awoke to find the lamp room burning with false light, a sick greenish luminescence that had nothing to do with the lighthouse's proper beam. He ran up the stairs, his heart hammering, and found Isla floating 3 feet above the ground, her hair rising around her like seaweed, her mouth open in a song that shattered the glass of the lantern room windows. The sea below was full of lights, dozens of them, hundreds of them, the ghost lights of every ship the Queen had ever claimed, rising from the depths to join her newest beacon. Thomas pulled her daughter down, held her against his chest while she screamed and clawed and bled seawater from her eyes. The lights in the sea flickered and dimmed as her song cut off, but they did not disappear. They were waiting, and Thomas knew with the certainty of a man who has spent his life reading the moods of the ocean that time was running out.
Chapter 5. False Lights on Black Water. The ship came apart on the Widow's Reef at 3 a.m. Thomas heard it from the lighthouse, the grinding crash of hull against rock, the screaming of metal, the higher screams of crew. He was running before he was fully awake, grabbing his coat and his emergency kit, descending the stairs 3 at a time. But when he reached the landing, he stopped. The lighthouse beam had not been pointing at the Widow's Reef. He had checked the mechanism himself at midnight. The beam had been sweeping its proper arc, warning ships away from the island's dangers, and yet the ship, a fishing vessel, he could see it now, listing badly, already taking on water, had sailed directly into the rocks as though guided there, as though following a different light. He launched the dinghy and made for the wreck. The fog had lifted just enough to see, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his days. 3 survivors clung to wreckage, their faces masks of shock and terror. The rest, he counted at least 7 bodies, floated face down in water that had gone still and black around the reef. Thomas pulled the survivors aboard one by one, 2 men, 1 woman, all speaking in fractured English, Eastern European accents, a Romanian crew, he would later learn, their vessel on a legitimate fishing run, their course set far from this island. "The light," one of the men kept saying. "We followed the light. It was so beautiful." "The lighthouse?" Thomas asked, already knowing the answer. "No, different. Green, coming from the island but not from the tower." The man's eyes were glazed with shock. "There was a woman's voice, singing. We couldn't stop ourselves. We turned the wheel and we followed, and then—" He broke down, sobbing. Thomas rowed them back to the lighthouse. He radioed for rescue, though he knew no one would answer. He made them warm and dry and gave them blankets and tea, and all the while he watched the stairs leading up to Isla's room. She had not moved when the ship crashed. He had checked on her before descending. She lay in her bed, eyes closed, breathing with that slow, deep rhythm that was not truly breathing at all. But when he returned with the survivors, he found her standing in the kitchen, the black glass in her hands, smiling. "3 more for the kingdom," she said in that echoing voice. 3 more to join the court." The female survivor screamed. She pointed at Isla with a shaking hand, shouting in Romanian, words Thomas did not understand but whose meaning was clear. She recognized something in his daughter, something she had seen in the water as her crewmates drowned. Thomas crossed the room and struck the glass from Isla's hands. It clattered across the floor, and Isla shrieked, not in pain but in rage, a sound that did not belong in a human throat, that echoed from the walls and the ceiling and the depths beneath the island. She lunged for him, her fingers hooked into claws, and Thomas barely caught her wrists before she reached his face. She was strong, impossibly strong, her thin arms corded with muscle that had not been there days ago.
Her teeth snapped inches from his throat, and when she screamed again, seawater gushed from her mouth, salt and cold and smelling of depths. The survivors fled into the night. Thomas would find them in the morning, huddled in the dinghy, too terrified to approach the lighthouse but with nowhere to go. For now, he wrestled with his daughter, with the thing his daughter was becoming, until exhaustion finally claimed her and she collapsed, limp and weeping, the possession temporarily broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't stop her. I can feel everything she feels, all the hunger, all the waiting. She's been alone for so long, trapped in the dark for centuries. And now she has me, and she has the light, and she'll never stop. She'll never calling them." Thomas carried her up to the lamp room and locked her inside. It was the only door strong enough to hold her, the only room with a lock she couldn't break. He wedged furniture against it and sat on the stairs outside, listening to her weep, listening to her sing, listening to her voice shift between the daughter he loved and the ancient thing wearing her skin. Someone will come, someone will hear the radio, someone will come. But the fog had closed in again, thicker than ever, and the sea had gone silent, except for that horrible, slow heartbeat rhythm, and Thomas knew in his keeper's soul that no one was coming. Whatever was happening on this island, they would have to face it alone.
Chapter 6: The Drowned Queen. On the morning of the 8th day, a boat emerged from the fog. Thomas watched it approach with a mixture of hope and dread. It was larger than Hamish's supply vessel, a research craft of some kind, its hull gray and official-looking, cutting through the unnaturally calm water with purposeful speed. 2 figures stood at the bow. Even at a distance, Thomas could see that one wore the black of a priest. He met them at the landing. The woman stepped ashore first, tall, dark-haired, her face sharp with intelligence and something else, something that might have been guilt. The priest followed, older, his white hair cropped short, his eyes holding a calm that Thomas immediately distrusted. "Mr. Brennan," the woman said, "I'm Dr. Helena Voss. I believe I'm responsible for what's happening here." Thomas said nothing. He had not slept in 2 days. His hands shook with exhaustion and fear, and the cut on his palms still bled, a slow, constant seeping that would not stop. "This is Father Callum Reed," Dr. Voss continued. "He specializes in—" She hesitated. "I'm an exorcist," Father Reed said. His voice was soft, Irish-accented, utterly without pretension. "I've spent 40 years studying things the church would prefer not to acknowledge. Dr. Voss contacted me when she realized what she'd done." "What has she done?" Thomas's voice cracked. "Tell me what's happening to my daughter." They climbed together to the lighthouse. Thomas told them everything as they walked: the glass, the changes, the shipwreck. Dr. Voss listened without interruption, her face growing paler with each detail. Father Reed simply nodded, as though confirming something he already knew. When they reached the lamp room door, they could hear Isla inside. She was singing, that terrible song that made the air taste of salt and the walls weep with condensation. Father Reed pressed his palm against the door and closed his eyes. "How long has she been like this?" "Days. I've lost count. She barely speaks anymore, not as herself. The thing inside her—" Thomas trailed off. Please tell me you can help her." Father Reed looked at Dr. Voss, and something passed between them. Knowledge, Thomas realized. Knowledge they had not yet shared. "You need to understand what we're dealing with. The artifact, the mirror fragment, it's not a container. I thought it was at first. I thought the entity was trapped inside the glass, waiting to be released." She shook her head. "I was wrong. The glass is a window, a connection point, and the entity, what the old texts call the drowned queen, she was never imprisoned. She was just distant, unable to reach our world except through that window." "What does that mean for Isla?" Father Reed answered.
The drowned queen doesn't possess people the way demons do. She's not taking over your daughter's body. She's using her as an anchor, a point of connection between her realm and ours. Isla is becoming a beacon, a lighthouse, if you will, a light that calls to the deep. Thomas leaned against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. The false lights, the shipwreck. It will get worse, Dr. Voss's voice was hollow. Every sailor who sees the light will be drawn to it. Every ship that passes will turn toward the rocks. She's been doing this for millennia, creating false lights to lure vessels to their doom. The souls of the drowned join her court. They feed her power. She met Thomas's eyes. In the ancient texts, they called her the mother of wrecks, the queen of hunger, the bride of empty waters. She was old before humanity learned to sail, and she hates our lights, the true lights, the ones that guide ships to safety, with a fury that defies description. "Then destroy the glass," Thomas said. "I've tried, but—" "You can't destroy it." Father Reed's voice was gentle. "Physical means won't work. The glass exists in her realm as much as in ours. To break it, you would have to sever the connection itself, and that requires—" He trailed off, his eyes moving to the lamp room door, to the sound of Isla sinning. "Requires what?" "A sacrifice," Father Reed said. "Something given freely, something that loves the light enough to become it." The singing stopped. In the silence that followed, they heard Isla's voice, her real voice, weak and frightened, struggling against the current that was drowning her. "Da?" Thomas was at the door in an instant, pressing his face against the cold metal. "I'm here, love, I'm here. I can feel what she's planning. Tonight, when the tide rises, she's going to finish what she started. She's going to use me to call them all, every ship within 100 miles. She'll light me up like a bonfire, Da, and I won't be able to stop." Thomas looked at Father Reed, at Dr. Voss, and saw his own desperation reflected in their faces. "Then we stop her first, whatever it takes, whatever the cost." Father Reed nodded slowly. "I'll need time to prepare, and you'll need to tell me everything you know about this lighthouse, its history, its keepers, every light that has burned here for safety and for love." "Why?" "Because love is the only weapon we have." Father Reed's smile was sad and knowing. "And because, Mr. Brennan, I suspect you already know what you're going to do. You've known since the moment you realized you couldn't save her any other way." Thomas said nothing, but his eyes went to the lamp room, to the light that had been his life's purpose, to the daughter who had made that purpose mean something. Above them, the fog began to darken toward night, and far below, in the depths beyond depths, something vast and ancient stirred, preparing for its final ascent.
Chapter 7. The Ritual of Rising Tides. Midnight came wrapped in thunder. The storm that had been gathering for days finally broke, transforming the sea into a chaos of black waves and white spray. Rain hammered the lighthouse with the force of thrown stones. Lightning fractured the sky, and in its flash, Thomas saw the ocean floor rising, or seeming to rise, as depths that should have been hundreds of fathoms below revealed themselves in moments of electric illumination. Father Reed had prepared the lamp room as best he could. He had drawn symbols on the floor in salt and his own blood, symbols from older faiths than Christianity, older protections than any prayer. Dr. Voss stood at the base of the stairs, her face gray with terror and guilt, clutching a sheaf of notes in languages dead for millennia. Thomas waited by the door, the key to the lamp room heavy in his hand. "It's time," Father Reed said. They opened the door. Isla hung suspended in the center of the room, 3 feet above the floor, her body rigid, her hair floating around her as though she were underwater. Her eyes were open and entirely black, not just the irises but the whites as well, replaced by depths that moved with their own internal currents. Her mouth was open too, and from it came a sound that was not her voice, a chorus of 1,000 drowned sailors singing in unison. We are coming. We are rising. The light calls, and we answer." Father Reed began to pray, not the Latin of Catholic ritual, but something older, words that seemed to hurt the air as he spoke them. The symbols on the floor began to glow with a faint phosphorescence. Isla's body convulsed, her back arching, her hands clawing at nothing. "Get out of her!" Thomas shouted. "Leave her alone!" Isla's head turned, a motion that belonged to no human spine, rotating too far, too smoothly, and her black eyes fixed on him. When she spoke, it was with a voice that contained the crash of waves and the silence of abyssal trenches. "You love her. I can taste it. I can taste all the love that has ever guided sailors home. It makes your light so bright. It makes them so easy to corrupt." Water began seeping under the door. Thomas felt it swirl around his ankles, shockingly cold, smelling of salt and decay. Within seconds, it was rising, too fast, impossibly fast, climbing his legs toward his waist. "I have waited so long to find one like her, a keeper's child, a light keeper's blood. She will burn for me forever. She will call ships to the rocks until the last vessel sails the last sea." Father Reed's prayers grew louder, more desperate. The water rose to his chest, and Thomas saw him struggling to keep his head above the surface. But the priest did not stop speaking, and the symbols on the floor, now submerged, visible only as wavering light beneath the dark water, flared brighter. Isla screamed. For a moment, just a moment, her eyes cleared, showing gray instead of black, terror instead of ancient hunger. "Da! Help me!" Thomas tried to wade toward her, but the water was too strong, the current pulling her toward the walls, away from his daughter. He saw Dr. Voss swept through the doorway, heard her screaming as she tumbled down the flooded stairwell. He saw Father Reed go under, his prayers bubbling up through the black water, his hands still raised in desperate benediction. And then he saw the Queen. She rose through the floor of the lamp room as though the stone were water, and perhaps now it was. She was impossibly tall, her form female but wrong, composed of currents and pressure and darkness visible. Her face was beautiful in the way that drowning was beautiful to those who had given up struggling. A terrible peace, a final surrender. Her eyes were the lanternfish lights of the aphotic zone, cold and hungry, and her voice, when she spoke, was every cry ever swallowed by the sea. "The priest is mine. His faith could not save him. Your love cannot save her." Father Reed surfaced, gasping, but Thomas saw immediately that something was wrong. His eyes were bulging, his mouth gaping. He was drowning, somehow, despite his head being above water. Drowning from the inside. "This is how they all die. This is how they all join me. Water in the lungs, salt in the blood. The sea claims what it is owed." "Let him go," Thomas screamed. "Let them all go." "And if I do, will you take his place? Will you give me your light?" Father Reed collapsed, his body going limp, sliding beneath the water. Thomas knew, without having to check, that the priest was dead. 40 years of fighting darkness, ended by a force that had existed before darkness had a name. The Queen turned to Isla, still suspended, still struggling, a butterfly pinned to invisible glass. "She is almost ready. A few more hours and she will be mine completely. A few more hours and your lighthouse will serve me, will call them all to me." The water began to recede, draining through cracks in the floor that had not existed moments before. The Queen was sinking with it, returning to the depths, satisfied that her victory was inevitable. Thomas watched her go. He watched the water drain from his daughter's lungs, seawater, not air, pumping out of Isla's mouth in great retching gasps. He watched the black fade from her eyes, leaving them gray and bloodshot and terrified.
Da, I can feel her. She's inside me. She's geeting me from the inside out. Thomas held his daughter. He held her while she wept. He held her while the storm raged and the lighthouse shook and the sea sang its patient, hungry song. And he began, slowly, to understand what Father Reed had been trying to tell him.
Chapter 8. A Father's Bargain. Dawn came, but the sky remained dark. Thomas found Dr. Voss at the base of the lighthouse, battered and bleeding, alive only through chance. She had caught a railing during her tumble down the flooded stairs. Father Reed's body floated in the entrance hall, his face peaceful, his eyes still open, still staring at something beyond sight. "We have to try again," Dr. Voss said. "There must be another way, another ritual, another—" "There is no other way." Thomas's voice was calm now, the calm of a man who has accepted the unacceptable. Father Reed knew it. He told me before we started, the only way to break the connection is to give her something else to anchor to. "What do you mean?" Thomas did not answer. He climbed the stairs to the lamp room where Isla lay curled on the floor, too weak now to stand. Her skin had gone translucent, her veins visible beneath like channels on a map of waterways. When she breathed, it was with a wet, gurgling sound. Her body was becoming water. Soon there would be nothing left of her but salt. "Da," her voice was barely a whisper. "Is it morning?" "Yes, love, it's morning." "Good." She tried to smile. "I always liked mornings. The way the light came through the fog made everything look like a painting." Thomas sat beside her, took her hand. It was cold and wet and felt wrong. The bones moved beneath the skin in ways bones should not move. "I'm going to save you," he said. "You can't. I heard what she said. I'm almost hers now. A few more hours and—" "I know what she said, and I know what she wants." Thomas lifted his daughter's hand and kissed it, tasting salt. "She wants a beacon. She wants a light to call the ships. Well," he looked at the lamp mechanism above them, the great lens that had guided sailors safely for 100 years. "I'll give her one." "Da, no." "I've been tending this light for 30 years. It's part of me. It's the only thing I know how to do." Thomas felt tears on his cheeks, though he could not remember starting to cry. "If she wants a keeper, she'll take me, and in exchange, she'll let you go." "That's not how it works." Isla's voice cracked. "You can't just—" "I can." Thomas stood, his decision made, his heart breaking. "Watch me." He descended to where Dr. Voss waited, her face pale with dawning understanding. "You're going to offer yourself," she said, not a question. "The Queen needs an anchor, someone connected to the light, someone whose blood and bone have been shaped by keeping it." He met her eyes. "There's no one on earth more connected to this lighthouse than me, and if I give myself freely, if I offer the bargain before she finishes with Isla, she'll have to accept." "You'll die." "No," Thomas shook his head slowly. "Death would be a mercy. I'll become what Father Reed described, a beacon, but instead of calling ships to their doom, I'll be a warning. I'll use whatever's left of me to fight her, to keep the light true." "You can't know that will work." "No, but I know what will happen if I don't try." He thought of Isla's eyes going black, her voice joining the chorus of the drowned. "And that's not something I can live with." Dr. Voss stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Get Isla off this island. When it's done, when the Queen accepts me, there will be a window, a moment when her attention is elsewhere. You'll have a chance to run." "And then?" "Then you forget about this place. You forget the glass, the Queen, all of it. You live your life and you tell Isla—" His voice broke. He had to take a breath before continuing. "Tell her I loved her. Tell her everything I did was for her. Tell her the light will always be watching over her, even when she can't see it." The hours that followed were the longest of Thomas's life. He sat with Isla, talking to her of nothing and everything, about her mother, about her childhood, about the storms they had weathered together, and the calm mornings after.
He talked until her eyes closed and her breathing steadied, until she slept with something like peace on her ravaged face. Then, as the sun set and the darkness claimed the sea once more, Thomas climbed to the lamp room and began to pray. Not to God, not to any God he had been taught to believe in. He prayed to the light itself, to every sailor who's seen this beam and known they were safe, to every life this lighthouse has preserved, to every hope that had ever burned in human hearts against the vastness of the hungry sea. "I'm ready," he said to the darkness, and from the depths, rising like a tide, the Queen answered.
Chapter 9. The Fall into the Deep. She came to him as she truly was, not the monstrous figure he had glimpsed in the flooded lamp room, but something older and stranger, a presence that filled the lighthouse like water filling a vessel, that spoke not with words, but with pressure and current, and the memory of every ocean that had ever existed. "You offer yourself. You know what this means." Thomas stood before the lamp mechanism, his hands resting on the cold glass of the lens. Below him, through the floor, through the stone of the lighthouse itself, he could feel Isla stirring, could feel the Queen's hook still in her, still pulling, still trying to complete what had been started. "Let her go," he said. "Take me and let her go." A father's love. I have tasted it before. It burns. It burns brighter than any light you could build. "Then take it. Take all of it, but free my daughter." The pressure increased. Thomas felt it in his bones, in his blood, in the spaces between his thoughts. The Queen was testing him, probing him, looking for weakness or hesitation. "She is almost mine. Why should I accept less when I could have more?" "Because I know this light better than anyone has ever known any light." Thomas's voice was steady now, the fear burned away by certainty. "I know every beam and every shadow, every rock it warns of, every safe harbor it guides to. If you take Isla, you'll have a beacon, but if you take me, you'll have a keeper, someone who can make the light do whatever you want." Silence. The pressure neither increased nor decreased. Thomas could feel the Queen thinking, considering, ancient intelligence weighing ancient hungers. "And in exchange, what do you want?" "Let Isla go. Let her leave this island and live her life. And," he took a breath, "and let me fight you." "Fight me?" "From inside, from wherever I'll be. Let me use whatever remains of me to turn ships away from the rocks, to warn them of danger, to be what I've always been, a keeper of the light." The laughter that answered was not sound, but sensation, a crushing weight, a drowning cold, an amusement older than the stars. "You would spend eternity in my realm, warring with me for every passing vessel?" "Yes." "And if you fail, if I claim them anyway?" "Then I'll keep fighting, every night, every ship, until the last sailor sails the last sea." Another silence, and then, impossibly, Thomas felt something like respect in the presence that surrounded him. "Very well, keeper, we have a bargain." Thomas acted before she could change her mind. He reached up and grasped the lamp mechanism, the great lens that focused and directed the beam, and he pulled. Metal shrieked, glass shattered, the lighthouse went dark for the first time in 100 years. And in that darkness, the Queen took him. It was not like dying. Thomas had always imagined death as an ending, a cessation, a final rest. This was the opposite, an expansion, an awakening into spaces he had never known existed. He felt himself dissolving, spreading, becoming part of something vast and cold and hungry. But he did not stop being Thomas. He held on to himself the way a drowning man holds on to driftwood. He held on to Isla's face, Margaret's laugh, the feel of wind on his skin at dawn after a storm. He held on to the memory of light, real light, true light, the kind that saved instead of destroyed. "You are strong.
the Queen acknowledged. "Stronger than I expected." Thomas did not answer. He was beyond words now, beyond speech, but he gathered what remained of himself, and he focused it, and he became into a light. Not the sick green phosphorescence of the Queen's false fires, but something warmer, something golden, something that flickered in the ruined lamp room of the lighthouse, a glow that should not have been possible with the mechanism destroyed. And far below, in the chambers where Dr. Voss held Isla's unconscious form, the black glass shattered. Isla convulsed, gasping, her eyes snapping open. They were gray, purely gray, no darkness in them at all. The translucent quality of her skin faded, color returning to her cheeks, warmth returning to her hands. "Da?" she whispered. "He's gone, but you're free. We have to go, Isla. We have to go now." They fled through the lighthouse, down the spiral stairs, past the entrance hall where Father Reed's body still floated. Outside, the storm had begun to break, stars appearing through tears in the clouds. Dr. Voss's boat waited at the landing, rocking gently in the suddenly calm water. Isla stopped at the door, looking back at the tower. The lamp room was dark, the mechanism destroyed, no light possible. But as she watched, something flickered, a warm glow, faint but unmistakable. It pulsed once, twice, 3 times. The old signal, the one her father had taught her when she was a child. "I love you. I am watching. Go." "Da," she whispered. Then Dr. Voss was pulling her toward the boat, and the island was falling away behind them, and the lighthouse stood dark and silent against the lightning sky, except for that faint, impossible glow burning in the ruins of the lamp room, like a heart that refused to stop beating.
Chapter 10. The Keeper Who Never Left. 5 years passed before Isla could return to the sea. She had tried, in those first months after the island. Dr. Voss had taken her to the mainland, had found her doctors and therapists in a place in the world. But every time Isla approached the water, even the calm waters of a lake, even the contained waters of a swimming pool, she felt her, the Queen, waiting, watching, held at bay by something she could not quite touch, but always, always there. So Isla moved inland. She finished her education, became an artist as she had always dreamed, filled galleries with paintings of seascapes she could never visit. Her work was acclaimed for its emotional power. Critics spoke of the terror and love in her depictions of waves and lighthouses, of the profound connection between safety and danger in her maritime compositions. None of them knew why her brush trembled when she painted the depths. None of them knew about the dreams that still came some nights, dreams of black water and singing voices, and a father who had become something more than human. It was Dr. Voss who finally convinced her to return. Helena had changed in the years since the island. The academic arrogance was gone, replaced by a haunted humility that Isla recognized all too well. She had published papers about the Carpathian Reliquary, carefully edited to remove any mention of the supernatural. She had quietly collected other artifacts like the black glass, fragments of the Queen's shattered connection points, and had them destroyed by rituals she learned from Father Reed's journals. "There are still ships," Helena said during one of their periodic meetings. "Commercial vessels, fishing boats. They pass through those waters every day, and sometimes," she hesitated, "sometimes they report something strange." "What kind of strange?" "Lights, in the fog, on dark nights. The lighthouse has been officially decommissioned for years. The lamp mechanism was never repaired. There shouldn't be any light at all." Helena's eyes met Isla's. "But sailors reported a warm glow, golden, not green. It appears when storms approach, when the currents run treacherous. It guides them away from the rocks." Isla's breath caught. "Da? Maybe, or maybe it's just stories. Sailors are superstitious, but I think—" Helena stopped, gathered herself. "I think you need to see. I think you need to know if he's still there." They made the crossing on a clear summer day, the Hebrides rising from the sea like stepping stones to somewhere beyond the world. Eilean Dubh appeared first as a smudge on the horizon, then as a shape,
then as the familiar silhouette that had been Isla's entire world for 17 years. The lighthouse stood as she remembered it, tall and white, and somehow patient, as though waiting for someone to return. The gallery where her father had watched the sea was empty. The lamp room was dark, its glass shattered, its mechanism rusted and still. But the island was not empty. Isla climbed the spiral stairs alone, leaving Helena at the base. With each step, she felt something stirring, not the cold dread of the Queen's presence, but something warmer, something that remembered bedtime stories and morning tea, and the way her father's rough hands had felt holding hers during storms. The lamp room was smaller than she remembered. The years had not been kind. Salt air and weather had eaten at the walls, and the great lens was crazed with cracks. But the floor was clean of debris, and in the center of the room, someone had placed a vase of wildflowers, sea thrift, yellow flag iris, the blooms that grew wild on the island's slopes. Fresh flowers, replaced from the look of it every few days. Isla sank to her knees. "Da?" The air shifted. Not a wind, there was no wind, but a change in pressure, in temperature, in the quality of light. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to deepen, but not in a threatening way, more like the darkness that comes when someone closes the curtains against the afternoon sun. Comfortable, familiar, safe. "Hello, love." The voice was not a sound, it was an impression, a memory, the echo of a voice she had known all her life. Isla began to cry. Are you suffering?" "No." A pause, as though the answer required consideration. "I am watching, waiting. The Queen is still there, in the deep places. She tests me sometimes, tries to turn my light false, but I hold on. I remember what lights are for." "Can I help? Can I do anything?" "You're here." Warmth flowed through the room, and Isla felt, impossibly, arms around her. Not physical, not quite, but present all the same. "You came back. That's everything. That's all I ever needed." They stayed like that as the sun set and the stars emerged. Helena waited below, patient, understanding. The sea whispered its eternal whispers, but for once they sounded almost peaceful, a conversation rather than a threat. As darkness fell, Isla watched the lamp room. There was no mechanism to produce light. There was nothing but ruins and memory and the stubborn love of a man who had refused to let her daughter be taken by the sea. And yet, the glow began as a flicker, then steadied into a warm golden pulse. It was not bright, not the powerful beam that had once warned ships miles away, but it was real. It was him. And as Isla watched through her tears, she saw it rotate slowly, sweeping the dark water, pointing toward the rocks, pointing toward the safe channels, pointing toward home. Somewhere far below, in the depths where no light should reach, something vast and ancient and hungry stirred and subsided. The Queen was still there. She would always be there. But tonight, and every night, she would find the light a little harder to corrupt, the keeper a little stronger to overcome, because Thomas Brennan was still at his post. Isla left the island the next morning, but she did not go far. She bought a cottage on the nearest inhabited island, close enough to see Eilean Dubh on clear days. She painted, she waited, and every night before she slept, she looked out her window toward the dark shape on the horizon. Sometimes there was no light. Those were the peaceful nights, the nights when no ships passed, when the sea was only the sea. But sometimes, on stormy nights, on foggy nights, on nights when the currents ran wrong and the rocks lay hungry beneath the waves, there was a glow, a warm golden pulse, rhythmic as a heartbeat, steady as a father's love. And sailors who passed too close to Eilean Dubh in bad weather would later tell strange stories in port. They would speak of lights where no lights should be, of voices in the wind that told them to turn back, to change course, to find another way, of the overwhelming sense in those treacherous waters that something was watching them, something that wanted them to live. The lighthouse was never officially relit. The authorities maintained that it was abandoned, decommissioned, dangerous to approach. Maps marked it as a hazard, not a guide. But the light kept burning. The keeper kept watch. And the sea, for all its hunger, all its ancient malice, all the drowned souls calling from its depths, the sea would have to wait a little longer. The end.